Today, we are grateful to have Dr. Shashi Tharoor, sir, Member of Parliament, as an esteemed guest of honor. Sir once said, India is not just a country, but a world in itself, filled with history, diversity, and infinite potential. This evening, we gather here to explore all the insights that will help us to unlock their potential and drive our nation's progress. Talking about the Cochin Chamber of Commerce and Industry, established in the year 1857 by a group of 9 Englishmen. Having completed 168 years of service in commerce, trade, and industry, it's one of the oldest industry trade body in the country. Chamber stands for the development that is equitable, sustainable, and green. And its members encompasses a wide spectrum of industrial, business, and trade sectors in and around Kerala. We are proud of its storied past and priceless legacy and are committed in providing the highest quality of services in the most professional manner to our members and the community we serve. Our motto is to achieve excellence, perfection, and satisfaction in all our dealings for the furtherance of the aspiration of the business community in Kerala. The Chamber has been involved in various initiatives, economic and social in the state, and has played a leading role in ensuring the overall development of the state. It was back in 2021, the India Forward Talk series was launched, focusing on various critical areas that was essential for India's progress, including environmental protection, infrastructure development, clarity in government policies, implementation, and education, amongst the others. The series aimed to foster discussion and initiatives geared towards the advancing of India's growth and development across multiple sectors. Now, I would like to invite our esteemed dignitaries to join us to the dais. Firstly, I would like to invite the President of Cochin Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Mr. S.P. Kamath, to the dais. To begin with, I would like to invite our President, Mr. S.P. Kamath, for the welcome address. Sir, please.
Respected Speaker of the Day, Dr. Shashi Tharoor, other distinguished guests, invitees, ladies and gentlemen, I must say at the outset, it's an historic day for us because we are hosting a very prominent seminar on Sunday. I have been associated with the Chamber for the last 32 years. I have not seen any program being held on Sunday. And not only that, 4 or 5 days back, we got a call from Dr. Shashi Tharoor's office that he has consented to address our audience. And on 12th at 6 p.m., then we immediately thought 12th happens to be Sunday, whether we will have the audience or not. We just spoke to 3 or 4 senior committee members and said what to do. Everybody said, if it is Dr. Shashi Tharoor, Monday or Sunday doesn't make difference. Let us go ahead. And today, we have been adding chairs after chairs. And 3 times we added the chairs today because we are getting more and more audience. Sir, that is the kind of love people of Cochin have for you, sir. It is with immense pleasure, pride and joy that I welcome you to today's event organized by the Chamber as we gather to explore a theme that holds profound relevance to every citizen of the nation. Onwards and upwards, or still an uphill task, disappearing Indian economy 2025. Friends, we are deeply honored to have with us as our guest of honor, a visionary leader, celebrated author, and an exceptional orator, Dr. Shashi Tharoor. May I now request our past President, Sri Venugopal, to kindly welcome Dr. Tharoor with a floral bouquet. And your nuanced understanding of India's socio-economic trajectory inspire meaningful discourse. The Indian economy, a dynamic tapestry of ambition and resilience, has come a long way since the dawn of liberalization. Today, as we stand on the threshold of 2025, the question before us is both challenging and exhilarating. Are we surging forward into an era of equitable prosperity, or are we still navigating through complex economic terrains? At a junction where India is poised on the brink of unparalleled opportunities, yet faces undeniable challenges This conversation is vital in deciphering where we stand and, more importantly, where we are headed. Sir, your illustrious career as a statesman, diplomat, author, and a thoughtful leader has not only enriched the intellectual fabric of our nation, but also placed India firmly on the global map of dialogue and diplomacy. Your keen understanding of the complexities of governance and economics, coupled with your ability to articulate them with clarity and elegance, makes you suited for today's discourse. As we delve into the Indian economic trajectory, it is essential to reflect on the strides we have made since independence and liberalization. India's journey has been marked by resilience and transformation, emerging as one of the fastest growing economies while grappling with the dual challenges of inclusive growth and sustainable development. Yet, as we stand at the threshold of 2025, critical question remains. First one, are we on a definitive path towards realizing the vision of 5 trillion economy? Two, how do we balance the forces of globalization and self-reliance in the wake of shifting geopolitical landscape? Point number three, what role will innovation, technology, and equitable policies play in addressing the disparity that persists? Dr. Tharoor, we are eagerly anticipate your perspective on these pressing issues. Your ability to distill complex realities into actionable insights will undoubtedly provide us with the clearer vision of the road ahead, whether it's a steep climb or it's a confident ascent. To our esteemed audience, your presence here reflects the collective intellectual curiosity and drive that are critical for advancing meaningful dialogue. Together, let us seize this opportunity to challenge the assumptions, question the paradigms, and seek solutions that will help us to realize our aspirations as a nation. Why, once again, on behalf of the Cochin Chamber of Commerce and Industry, I extend a very warm welcome to all present here. We are eager to embark on this intellectual voyage with all of you under guidance and brilliance of Dr. Shashi Tharoor. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
In this auspicious occasion, let's commence our event by lighting the lamp.
Everybody. I have quite the unenviable task of introducing someone who absolutely needs no introduction. One of the biggest challenges in introducing an eminent personality like Dr. Tharoor is to try and balance the need to include all important details while also trying to keep it very short and sweet. So an author, politician, and former international diplomat, Dr. Shashi Tharoor straddles several worlds of experience. At present, a fourth-term member of parliament, he represents the parliamentary constituency of Thiruvananthapuram, Kerala in the Lok Sabha. A member of the Indian National Congress, he has served as a Minister of State for External Affairs, Minister of State for Human Resource Development in the Government of India, during the second term of the United Progressive Alliance. At present, the chairperson of the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Chemicals and Fertilizers He has previously chaired the Parliamentary Standing Committees on External Affairs and Information Technology.
External Affairs again now.
So I stand corrected. He is now also on the Standing Committee of External Affairs. Born in London, Dr. Tharoor received a pan-India education, attending schools in Mumbai and Kolkata and college in Delhi, before moving to the United States for graduate school. In 1978, at the young age of 22, he completed a PhD at the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy, Tufts University, becoming the youngest person at the time to have ever done so. Before joining Indian politics, Dr. Tharoor worked for nearly 3 decades at the United Nations, serving as a peacekeeper, refugee worker, and administrator at the highest levels, including as Under Secretary General during Mr. Kofi Annan's tenure as Secretary General. Dr. Tharoor is also an award-winning, internationally best-selling author of over 25 books of both fiction and non-fiction. He's won a score of prestigious literary honors, including the Commonwealth Writers' Prize, the Crossword Lifetime Achievement Award, and the Sahitya Academy Award, India's second highest literary prize in the category of English non-fiction for An Era of Darkness, his magisterial indictment of the British Raj. Dr. Tharoor has spent the greatest part of his literary and public life articulating, defending, and championing the idea of India anchored in its constitution. At present, he is a full-time member of the Congress Working Committee. In the Indian politics of today, where the government and opposition see each other as enemies, not mere adversaries, and common ground is becoming very hard to find, Dr. Tharoor often stands out as one of the few voices of reason. It's our absolute privilege to have him here today with us and hear him speak, and I now invite him to deliver his address.
These introductions always make you feel very good and put you in the right frame of mind, but I think it'll be honest to admit that they're always very selective. They say all the nice things you want to hear, and they leave out all the unpleasant things that have happened in your life, which is also part of, the experiences that got you here. But I'm often reminded when I hear these introductions of the story of the person entrusted with the same task as Praveen Thomas in such a distinguished gathering, who decided that everyone knew the speaker didn't really need an introduction, so he decided to look up the speaker's antecedents, up the family tree, the deeds and misdeeds of parents and grandparents and so on. And so he found, this is an American story, he found that the speaker had an uncle who had been electrocuted for kidnapping and armed robbery or something, sentenced to death in the electric chair some years ago. Now, having taken the trouble to look it up, he felt he had to use it. But of course, these introductions had to be very flattering. So he said, our distinguished speaker had an uncle who occupied the chair of applied electricity at one of the nation's leading institutions, which is just my way of saying that these kind words should always be taken with a suitable pinch of salt. But Mr. Kamath, Ms. Vinodini, the distinguished members of the chamber, ladies and gentlemen, as we say in Kerala, ellavarikkum ende vinidamaya namaskaram. Very good to see you all, and thank you for having assembled on a Sunday evening, which is certainly well beyond the call of reason, but thank you for doing it nonetheless. My schedule tends to be very constrained, and I often forget that there is supposed to be a day of rest in the 7-day week. I've never had one, so I sometimes inflict my schedule on the rest of you. My apologies. But it really is an honor to address this full house on this esteemed gathering under the auspices of the Cochin Chamber of Commerce and collaboration of 9 pioneering Englishmen, I understand. But in the 160 years since, more than 160 years since, you've carved out a legacy of incomparable contributions to our state's commerce, industry, and trade. From your earliest days, the Chamber has been steadfast in its mission to foster cooperation among the mercantile community and promote equitable, sustainable, and green development. The foundational principles laid out in your very first annual general meeting in 1858, which was to promote friendly relations among merchants, address grievances, and advance the common good, remain just as relevant today as it was then. These principles have been reflected in its actions, whether through the adoption of commercial arbitration practices, the formulation of the famous Cochin tonnage scale, or your advocacy for high standards of probity in business. The Chamber's illustrious legacy extends far beyond the precincts of mere commerce, embodying a profound dedication to civic betterment and social stewardship, your far-sighted resolve, exemplified by your forward-thinking endorsement of quarantine measures during the bubonic plague of 1897, the pioneering introduction of a staff pension scheme in 1935. All of this reflects an ethos that goes beyond the narrow boundaries of business. Such initiatives underscore your Chamber's unwavering commitment to societal welfare, demonstrating a visionary understanding of the interplay between commerce and community. It's indeed noteworthy to recognize the Chamber's astute and proactive engagement in influencing the political and social ethos of your era. The willingness to take principled stands on pressing issues, as seen in your communication to the British government during the Home Rule movement, exemplifies your belief in the responsibility of business to contribute to the greater social good. In this, the Cochin Chamber has been not merely an observer, but a shaper of history, adding depth and dimension. The Associated Chambers of Commerce and Industry, ASSOCHAM, as one of its 5 promoter chambers, the Cochin Chamber has positioned itself as a critical interface between the business community and the government, addressing issues ranging from commerce to civic responsibilities. Your enduring commitment to fostering excellence, sustainability, and progress speaks volumes about your relevance and adaptability in an ever-changing economic landscape. And this, of course, brings me to your most recent and illuminating initiative, the India Forward Talk series. In launching this series, the Chamber has reaffirmed its dedication to knowledge dissemination and national progress. Through insightful discussions and engaging dialogues, India Forward serves as a platform for envisioning the future of our nation, featuring distinguished speakers whose expertise and vision inspire and enlighten. By hosting this initiative, the Chamber underscores its role as a thought leader and a catalyst for India's advancement. It's truly a privilege to contribute to the series, following in the footsteps of illustrious predecessors who've graced the stage, many of whose names have already been mentioned, and who've shared their perspectives on the way forward for our great nation. Now, in celebrating the achievements of the Cochin Chamber of Commerce and Industry, we're always reminded of the enduring importance of institutions that combine heritage with forward-thinking vision. As we gather today, let us draw inspiration from the Chamber's rich history and its commitment to fostering progress, excellence, and societal well-being. It's through such unwavering dedication that we can collectively advance the aspirations of our business community and our nation at large. India's journey of economic transformation has often been likened to a remarkable metamorphosis. In my 2007 book, which some of you may have come across, The Elephant, the Tiger, and the Cell Phone, I described the Indian economy as an old elephant, a creature with a big, slow, lumbering gait and a long but not always happy history. For decades, this elephant trudged along under the weight of stagnation, constrained by policies of self-reliance that inadvertently stifled growth. But the elephant's journey took a decisive turn in 1991, when India embarked on a path of economic reform that would reshape its destiny. Liberalization, privatization, and globalization injected new vitality into the economy, gradually replacing the elephant's old bulk with muscle. Over time, something extraordinary began to emerge, large black stripes swirling across its form. These stripes, bold and dynamic, symbolize the rise of a new India, an India of entrepreneurs, innovators, and startups. The elephant was evolving into a tiger, sleek, agile, industrious, and ready to leap into the future. Today, this transformation is not merely metaphorical. It is borne out by India's economic achievements. From navigating the global financial crisis to rebounding strongly after the disruptions of COVID-19, the resilience of our economy is undeniable. Between 2016 and 2023, startups alone contributed a staggering 10 to 15% to GDP growth, underscoring their role as the driving force behind India's economic engine. According to the Confederation of Indian Industry, these entrepreneurial ventures are projected to generate $1 trillion for the economy and create, they claim, 50 million new jobs by the fiscal year 29-30. Now, this remarkable trajectory of growth and innovation, if it happens, owes much to a transformative moment in India's history, guided by the luminous intellect and steadfast resolve of a statesman we mourn today, whose vision reshaped the nation's destiny. In 1991, Dr. Manmohan Singh, then finance minister, stood in Parliament and declared that no power on earth could stop an idea whose time had come. With those words, he not only heralded a new economic dawn, but also embodied a quiet, unyielding determination to steer India out of the shadows of stagnation and into an era of global relevance. Today, as we reflect on his profound legacy, we are met with the solemn reality of his passing, a loss that resonates deeply across the nation. Dr. Singh was more than just the architect of India's economic resurgence. He was a living testament to the enduring idea of India, one rooted in service, intellect, and compassion. His reforms did not just liberalize the economy. They liberated millions of Indians to dream bigger, aspire higher, and thrive. Even as we navigate an ever-changing economic and political landscape, his contributions remain the foundation of much that we celebrate today. Dr. Singh did not just craft economic policies. He laid the foundations for a transformed India. As finance minister, he courageously dismantled the license permit quota Raj, liberalizing an economy that had been constrained by regulation, over-regulation, and inefficiency. His visionary reforms not only averted a full-blown economic crisis, but opened up avenues for trade, innovation, and investment that would fuel India's growth for decades to come. Yet it would be myopic to view him solely as the architect of India's economic liberalization. Dr. Singh understood that for economic freedom to have meaning, it must translate into social and political empowerment. His vision was inclusive, his leadership transformative. Under his stewardship as Prime Minister, India saw unprecedented efforts to reduce inequality and empower the marginalized. The Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme bolstered rural incomes and rural purchasing power, anchoring India's economy amidst global uncertainty. His government introduced the Aadhaar scheme, providing a digital identity to millions of Indians who had previously been invisible to the state, thus strengthening their access to welfare and services. Moreover, the Right to Information Act of 2005 epitomizes his commitment to participatory democracy. By empowering citizens to hold public officials accountable, this landmark legislation deepened the transparency of governance and the trust of the governed. The Right to Education Act of 2009 brought millions of children into classrooms, investing in the human capital that would define India's future. These initiatives remain vibrant testimonies to his belief in a more equal, just, and educated India. Even today, under the very different stewardship of Mr. Narendra Modi, the frameworks established by Dr. Singh continue to endure and thrive. Programs like Aadhaar have expanded. Manrega remains a lifeline for rural India, and the liberalized economy he unlocked continues to draw international investment. His legacy serves as the foundation upon which successive governments have built. His policies not tethered to partisan boundaries, but imbued with the universality of their vision. And as we stand in fractured and fractious times, as Praveen mentioned, when divisive ideologies threaten to overshadow the spirit of collective progress, I would argue that Dr. Singh's life serves as a clarion call to all of us. He reminds us that governance must be an act of service, not of spectacle, and that true leadership lies in lifting others to greater heights. His steadfast and selfless service exalted every Indian and transformed India into a more resilient, equitable, and empowered nation. Today, as I pause to reflect, I'm reminded of the indelible mark Dr. Manmohan Singh has left on India's economic trajectory. Between 1st July 2021 and 31 December 2023, while the average growth worldwide was 46%, Kerala recorded a staggering 254% compound annual growth rate. It's a phenomenal feat, one reflective of our tremendous capacity to innovate and inspire. And as somebody who has long been a critic of the business culture of our state, or the lack of it, I once said that at the Trivandrum Management Association, that God's own country seemed to be the devil's own playground for business. It's changing, and that's something we can all celebrate and welcome. Rapidly emerging as a global epicenter of entrepreneurship, India now boasts of the world's third largest startup ecosystem. Our country has more than 140,000 startups, more than 100 unicorns, dominating such sectors, as I mentioned, as fintech, also e-commerce, healthcare, which are together valued at more than $500 billion, trailing behind only the US and China. From Zoho to Zomato, Card Dekho to Cred, legions of Indian unicorns have risen to tower over our economy, setting benchmarks in innovation and even leading global players in the Indian market to shudder in fear of being eclipsed. When the angel investor Eileen Lee first coined the term unicorn to refer to startups valued at over $1 billion, she meant to refer to something mythical, something rare. India, however, has proven her wrong, because far from being rare or mythical, our unicorns are now proliferating, multiplying by leaps and bounds every year. In fact, in the realm of fintech alone, India has built 26 unicorns, including one decacorn, which are together valued at $90 billion. As India's entrepreneurial ecosystem expands, one state stands out as a model of economic innovation and sustainable growth. I never thought I would say it, but it is Kerala. With its strong historical foundation and strategic economic initiatives, Kerala has emerged as a dynamic center for startups, driving significant contributions to India's broader economic transformation. This growth is exemplified by the remarkable progress of the startup ecosystem in the state, which has experienced impressive valuations and rapid scaling, positioning the state as a key player in India's economic ascent and a recognized leader in fostering entrepreneurial excellence. In 2023, startups in Kerala raised $33.2 million, marking a 15% increase from the previous year, with seed stage funding up by 40%. The Kerala Startup Mission has been at the forefront of this expansion, working to establish Kerala as a global hub for deep tech innovation. A testament to this vision is the $180 million emerging technology hub being developed at TechnoCity in Trivandrum, which is just beyond, it's kind of an expansion of the Techno Park that you all know was the first Techno Park in India. The state also ranked highly in the 2024 Global Startup Ecosystem Report, as I already mentioned, standing out for its affordable tech talent and performance. Notably, Kerala's commitment to advancing its startup sector is further demonstrated by the recent foundation of India's first digital science park in Trivandrum, a $181 million multidisciplinary initiative. With such dynamic growth, Kerala is well positioned to continue leading India's tech and entrepreneurial transformation, contributing to the nation's larger vision of becoming a global economic powerhouse by fostering innovation, generating employment, and attracting investment across key sectors. While Kerala's flourishing startup ecosystem offers a glimmer of hope, the broader Indian economy presents a more complicated picture. And particularly when we turn to the rather lofty ambitions expressed by Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Despite the bruising election results, Mr. Modi's vision for a Viksit Bharat, or developed India by 2047, remains at the heart of his government's agenda. This goal, marking the centenary of India's independence, envisions our country moving beyond its emerging economy status to developed status. But recent economic indicators paint a rather worrying picture. The National Statistical Office has pegged India's GDP growth for 24-25 at the slowest pace in the last 4 years, at 6.4%, primarily due to sluggish performance in manufacturing and services, falling short of earlier expectations, including earlier projections by the Reserve Bank of India and by the Finance Ministry. Despite the fanfare around the government's 5 trillion economy promise, India's economic journey has been far from smooth. The road to a developed India, it seems, is not as straightforward or as smooth as it was painted. While the Modi government has indeed presided over economic growth, its record on job creation reveals a disquieting paradox: a growing economy that has struggled to produce sufficient opportunities for its labor force. Approximately 40% of India's workers remain tied to agriculture, a sector increasingly vulnerable to climate change, while just 20% are employed in manufacturing or business services such as IT. This imbalance underscores the conundrum of jobless growth, a critique the opposition has seized upon with vigor. Despite launching ambitious programs like Make in India and the Production-Linked Incentive Scheme, or PLI, which collectively aimed to revolutionize India's manufacturing landscape, tangible results have been elusive. Manufacturing's share of output has stubbornly stagnated since 2014, revealing the limitations of these initiatives in addressing structural bottlenecks. Meanwhile, agriculture, India's largest employer, faces existential threats from climate change, with projections suggesting the loss of 34 million jobs by 2030 due to rising temperatures and erratic monsoons. Even more troubling is India's glaring gender disparity in the labor force. As of 2023, only 32.7% of eligible women participate in the workforce, compared to 76.8% of men. We are an anomaly among nations with comparable income levels. Without deliberate intervention, India will fall short of its ambitious economic targets. To achieve the $30 trillion economy that Mr. Modi announced or envisioned for 2047, the nation will have to add 145 million women to its workforce, a Herculean task that requires dismantling entrenched societal norms and empowering women to lead economic change. And the urgency and importance of this challenge cannot be overstated. While India is, of course, ahead of China now as the world's most populous nation, projections suggest that our workforce will not outnumber theirs until the middle of the century, despite our population being significantly younger than China's. Over 50% of our population is below the age of 25, a demographic that could be our greatest strength or our greatest vulnerability. Yet this immense potential is at risk. Youth in particular are disproportionately affected, facing barriers to opportunities that threaten to undermine our demographic dividend. Without decisive action, this advantage could turn into a liability. You know that we have the world's highest unemployed number of college graduates. Now, to truly harness their potential, this young and vibrant nation that we're supposed to be, we have to move beyond political rhetoric and short-term fixes. Our future depends on bold reforms, streamlining regulatory processes, committing to much more open trade policies, and fostering inclusive growth that prioritizes opportunities for women and rural communities. If we fail to act now, the demographic advantage we celebrate today could become the challenge we regret tomorrow. Now let's turn our attention to manufacturing, a sector that holds a promise in some ways of transforming not only our economy, but the very lives of millions of unemployed Indians. It is a domain brimming with opportunities, capable of lifting countless individuals out of unemployment, driving innovation, and positioning India as a formidable force on the global stage. Because manufacturing, as we all know, is the engine of economic growth for many developed nations. It has the potential to create stable, long-term employment while fostering skill development and innovation. For India, with our vast workforce and abundant natural resources, this sector could become the backbone of our economic ambitions. We have the vision, or at least some of us do, and the capacity to become the world's manufacturing hub, especially as the global supply chains are increasingly looking for alternatives to China, or at least to a China plus one strategy. However, despite this immense potential, the growth of manufacturing in India has been stifled by systemic challenges that hold us back from just seizing this opportunity. One of the most significant obstacles, let's be honest, is our strict labor laws. These laws, though well-intentioned, are often rigid and outdated, creating barriers for businesses. Employers find themselves constrained by rules that limit flexibility, making it difficult for them to scale their operations or hire new workers. In trying to protect the rights of a few, we inadvertently create hurdles for the many, stifling the growth of industries that could otherwise absorb our unemployed into the labor force. Our aspirations to position India as a reliable China plus one alternative are further complicated by bureaucratic hurdles. The labyrinth of permissions, licenses, and approvals required to set up or expand manufacturing deters investors. These inefficiencies discourage multinational companies from committing themselves fully to India as much as they might, because in fact, they desire to diversify the supply chains, but we don't seem to them to be the best possible place to park their manufacturing. If we are to compete with other emerging economies, we're already trailing behind Vietnam, Malaysia, Indonesia, Mexico, and they're all vying for the same position, then we have to address our roadblocks decisively, or we will simply not get there. And then there is the question of infrastructure. We know that progress has been made, let's not deny that. Reliable transportation networks, modern logistics systems, uninterrupted energy supply are all critical to a thriving manufacturing ecosystem. Yet there are still gaps in all these areas in our country. They increase costs and they make it harder for Indian manufacturers to compete on a global scale. Any country that aspires to be a manufacturing powerhouse must have reliable foundational infrastructure to support its ambitions. I agree progress is being made there, but is it enough? And have we reached a point where we can point to it as giving potential manufacturers the assurances they need? I'm not sure we are yet there. But that does continue to hinder the growth of many small and medium enterprises, which after all form the backbone of ours and any other country's manufacturing sector. Without adequate financial support, these enterprises struggle to scale up their operations, innovate, or play a meaningful role in global supply chains. These challenges are compounded by the need for streamlined regulations and a business-friendly environment to make India a preferred destination for foreign and domestic investments. With countries, as I said, like Vietnam and Indonesia, positioning themselves with greater success and much more aggressively. So we must overcome these roadblocks, and with the right policies and the right intent, we can make a tangible difference. Manufacturing is not just about factories and machines. It's about livelihoods, aspirations, the future of our nation. It is a sector that can bridge the gap between potential and prosperity, between ambition and achievement. If we're serious about realizing the promise of manufacturing and establishing ourselves as a manufacturing destination, we must tackle these challenges head-on, reform labor laws to balance flexibility with fairness, streamline bureaucratic processes to foster enterprise and investment, and invest in world-class infrastructure to ensure that no aspiring entrepreneur is left behind for lack of financial support. Our fiscal policy, particularly India's commitment to maintaining a deficit target of 3% of GDP, reflects a prudent approach to fiscal discipline and long-term economic stability. However, despite these efforts, the reality has been less than ideal, with the fiscal deficit steadily growing over the past decade. This widening gap has placed significant strain on government finances, raising concerns about the sustainability of ongoing spending programs. While the government's aim to reduce the deficit to 4.5% of GDP by March 26 is a step in the right direction, it remains far from the original target. Such persistent fiscal imbalances are a matter of concern as they risk escalating borrowing costs and potentially jeopardizing India's credit rating. Moreover, the government's plan to shift its fiscal policy anchor from a fixed deficit target to a debt to GDP ratio after 26 is another indicator of strained finances. While this approach might offer flexibility, it doesn't address the root issue, our ever-growing reliance on borrowing to cover expenditures. High debt burdens not only constrain the government's capacity to invest in growth-oriented programs, but also make the economy vulnerable to external shocks. To add to this, India's current account deficit has widened significantly, driven by a persistent trade deficit and declining foreign investments. This imbalance further weakens our economic standing and complicates efforts to promote self-reliance while fostering growth. So while the government may tout high nominal growth rates as a buffer, the reality is that unchecked fiscal deficits, ballooning debt, and widening trade gaps pose significant risks to India's economic stability in the long run. These are issues we cannot afford to ignore if we are to ensure sustained and inclusive growth for the future. India, my friends, stands at a crossroads. The dreams of a Viksit Bharat by 2047 hinge not merely on growth figures, but on addressing the fissures in the labor market. The road to becoming a developed nation demands much more than ambition. It requires action rooted in equity, sustainability, and structural transformation. Only then can we truly rise to India's promise as a global economic powerhouse. We must focus on addressing key challenges in human and capital development, particularly in education and healthcare, which hinder labor productivity and economic growth. With public expenditure on healthcare at only 1.9% of GDP, which is very low, our country lags behind in providing the necessary foundation for an efficient and adaptable workforce. Poor education and health outcomes limit labor productivity, a crucial factor in driving economic growth and improving living standards. As of 2019, India had the lowest GDP per hour worked among BRICS nations, largely due to the informal labor market, low technology adoption, and insufficient infrastructure. Addressing these issues requires not only increased public investment in education and in healthcare, but also a focus on skill development tailored to the needs of emerging industries, including those driven by climate change and digital transformation. By comparison, China's rapid productivity growth, driven by state-led industrial policies, infrastructure investments, export-led growth, and integration into global markets, has enabled them to significantly outperform India. Despite India being the fourth largest economy in the G20 by purchasing power parity, its GDP is only 17% of China's, reflecting the growth gap. If India had kept pace with China, at least with China's economic trajectory over the past 40 years, our GDP should have been around 10 trillion already, rather than the current 3.47 trillion. Our rural population makes up 64% of the total, and our low per capita income, infrastructure, while also formalizing the labor market, encouraging technological adoption, and improving governance models to facilitate large-scale projects. Additionally, policies that support gender equity in the workforce, as well as climate change resilience, will play key roles in fostering a more inclusive and sustainable economic growth trajectory. We in India ought to focus on bolstering our vital infrastructure. Instead of surging ahead of our competitors in Asia, we're lagging behind, continuing at a pace that is much too slow for rapidly transmuting India into an entrepreneurial journey. And improve the quality of life right across the country, we must address these gaps. This means investing in rural and digital infrastructure that can enable more equitable growth and greater access to technology. Furthermore, a reform of labor laws, I've already mentioned this, combined with a favorable environment for incentives, can unlock significant potential in the manufacturing sector. One thing is clear. Despite the daunting challenges we face, Indians are still continuing to dream big and those dreams have often translated into remarkable economic and technological progress. We have a history of bold aspirations, from launching rockets into space when we were still a very poor country, to harnessing nuclear energy, even when we were still emerging from the shadows of colonial rule and struggling with widespread poverty and illiteracy. When our first Prime Minister, Jawaharlal Nehru, launched India's space program in 1963, many of you may remember how the moment was immortalized by the legendary French photographer Henri Cartier-Bresson, who captured the image of a rocket part being transported by a bullock cart. India is home currently to about 40 to 50 startups specializing in quantum technologies, a promising sector that could redefine industries, fuel economic growth, and strengthen India's position as a global economic power. The spirit of innovation and entrepreneurship underscores India's economic potential. With a growing middle class, a booming digital economy, and a thriving startup ecosystem, India is on the brink of becoming all that we talked about earlier in the speech. The government's focus on fostering innovation through initiatives like Make in India, Startup India, Digital India reflects a strategic shift towards building a robust, knowledge-driven economy. India's ability to leapfrog into sectors like fintech, e-commerce, and clean energy, backed by a young and tech-savvy workforce, demonstrates its readiness to harness the potential of these emerging markets to drive growth. Now, the problem is both things exist at the same time. I've given you both the good news and the bad news. The problem is the good news is at the top of the economy. The bad news is at the very large bottom. Now, according to a NASSCOM study, the Indian startup landscape is slated to create 1.25 million, that's 12.5 lakh direct employment opportunities by next year alone. This growth can be augmented if the government, in collaboration with both the stakeholders like all of you and the opposition like me, if we can foster a formidable digital economy, introduce tax incentives, and establish government-backed and public-private incubators, then we can get ahead. To buttress the significant strides we've been making in the realms of AI and quantum technology, India should be perhaps more amenable to such emerging avenues as cryptocurrency and Web3. It's the allure and widespread governmental acceptance of these technologies abroad that at times compels some Indian entrepreneurs to disentangle from the economic future of India to seek greener pastures elsewhere. Too many are migrating to places like Dubai and Singapore when they could and should ideally be retained here. We have to reverse that. All in all, the quest for a young, aspirational, and entrepreneurial India is a crucial aspect of the nation's journey towards a progressive future. From Pravas Chandragiri's Soptle to Ritesh Agarwal's Oyo, Nikhil Kamat's Zeroda to Adit Palicha and Kaivalya Vora's Zepto, the majority of prominent Indian startups were launched by young and dynamic Indians. In order to augment this fervor, we need to transform India from a job-seeking to a job-creating economy. As a nation, we are well equipped to drive and benefit from technological advancements, not just within our borders, but on the global stage. Our creativity and entrepreneurial drive are ingrained in our culture, as evidenced by our well-known concept of jugaad, a term synonymous with finding practical, ingenious solutions to everyday challenges. I know many tend to dismiss this obsession with jugaad as kind of merely a quick fix. But it actually encapsulates an economic mindset, the ability to innovate under constraints, to deal with limited resources and still adapt to market needs, to turn challenges into opportunities. It's this spirit of resourcefulness and resilience that has long fueled India's economic revolution, positioning our country to continue its ascent in the global economy. And I will say that we're seeing examples of this kind of jugaad, or this kind of spirit anyway, in the realm of quick commerce. The astronomically successful ride-hailing and on-demand delivery services like Rapido and Blinkit. Riding on the crest of India's digitization and peer-to-peer payments wave, these startups have transformed the simple idea of rapid neighborhood deliveries into a powerhouse of scaled, efficient retail. all while generating a fair amount of gig employment, though the working conditions of Indian gig workers, about 7 million of them right now, remain far from satisfactory. Now, while this is a pernicious issue that Indian lawmakers must tackle, one thing is unmistakable. Long gone are the days when Indians had to rely on obliging friends and relatives of returning from abroad to bring them all sorts of goodies that weren't easily available in our country. Today, owing to these startups, which are firmly anchored in characteristic Indian ingenuity, India is a country where in less than 15 minutes, with only a few clicks of a smartphone, you can have the latest iPhone, a PlayStation 5, and bread butter jam, all home delivered, all from the same app, and that too, for the most part, 24/7. Ultimately, it's undeniable that the elephantine tiger I began with has come a long way, its lumbering gait evolving into a purposeful stride. Gradually emerging from the sanctuary of economic suffocation, the singular hybrid has leapt into the global commercial wilderness, ready to dominate it. In fact, when I wrote my book in 2007, the cell phone was my metaphor for the instrument of this change. Today, it's undoubtedly the internet and the rise of digital infrastructure, which are reshaping India's economy and opening new pathways for growth. Our government must be aware of this and must tirelessly endeavor to improve infrastructure, boost digital connectivity, and, reversing the terrible income inequality plaguing us, promote lasting financial inclusion. Only then will we arrive at the glorious tomorrow we so fervently dream of, a tomorrow where the indomitable entrepreneurs of India, their feet planted firmly on the ground, even as their visions soar ever higher, will transform our nation into a thriving economy driven by innovation, enterprise, and the limitless potential of our vast human capital. As agriculture, manufacturing, and services converge with new age industries, India's economy will flourish, creating opportunities and prosperity for all sections of our enormous population. The future, ladies and gentlemen, is India's for the giving and the taking. And I'm convinced it'll soon be available for pre-order in Cochin, with the indomitable spirit of Indian entrepreneurship and our flourishing economy leading the way. We just have to make the effort to get there. Thank you all very much, and Jai Hind.
Good evening, sir. Good evening. Sir, I am Linesh, Assistant Professor, Jain, DMW University, Kochi. So my question is that Donald Trump has threatened that 100% duty imposed import from the BRICS countries. If US law permits, it will come into force. Then how it will affect our export, our India's export to US, sir?
So he said if the BRICS go ahead with the plan that was floated by the Chinese to create an alternative BRICS currency in which they would trade with each other, then they would punish us with 100% tariffs. But frankly, not only is this alternative currency not ready, but I think there will be some resistance within BRICS. Don't forget the BRICS composition has expanded now, and there are countries like Egypt, the UAE, and others in it who are certainly not interested in undermining the US dollar. So I don't see a BRICS currency becoming a realistic threat, and therefore 100% tariffs will not happen in the foreseeable future. But if you want to look at Trump's other threat, not of 100% tariffs, which, as I said, is linked to a particular issue, but his desire to add tariffs to those countries that are protectionist. So India will have retaliatory tariffs in the US every time we impose tariffs on their products. I mean, Trump uses a bad example. He keeps talking about Harley-Davidson motorcycles. Frankly, if you remove all the tariffs on Harley-Davidson motorcycles, it won't make such difference, because I believe we imported a total of 187 Harley-Davidson motorcycles in the last year. So it's not a large number. But I think the broader issue is we will need to re-examine our protectionism. I'm a bit more of a Jagdish Bhagwati man on this. I'm more in favor of trade liberalization, because I think it's a win-win. I'm not in favor of liberalizing for countries like China, which frankly dump products on our market and drive Indians out of business. But trade liberalization with more responsible economies and who have fairer practices is actually healthy for us because it's always reciprocal. And our exports will increase. We desperately need to increase exports, not just for the old thing of getting foreign exchange. Our foreign exchange situation is okay. Why we need to increase exports is because export-driven growth will actually massively create manufacturing jobs in our country. If we keep being protectionist, people will not import our goods, and as a result, our exports will not grow. In fact, exports have not grown in the last few years of this government's economic policy. So that's why I think Trump's tariff threat should be taken seriously, and we should re-examine our own tariffs, because otherwise we will face retaliation. And it may happen very soon. I mean, Trump is coming to office on the 20th of January. Our budget is being presented on the 1st of February. We may find retaliation happening very soon.
Who painted a black and white picture of the
I thought there was lots of grey there, sir.
A lot of grades about the Indian economy. My question is, in 1991, and you also referenced it several times in your talk, Dr. Manmohan Singh presented a path-breaking budget. Now, it's 34 years since that has happened. Why no other finance minister has been able to present a similar path-breaking budget which would have taken India to the next level? It's a question that's been in my mind always. Is it due to intellectual paucity or the shortcomings of Western economic models, or any other reasons that you can think of?
So I would say, first of all, there was actually one more visionary budget, and that was Mr. Chidambaram's budget of 97, the UF budget. Unfortunately, that government only lasted 1 year, and I'm not sure whether they had the political clout to deliver, but he did have some very remarkably forward-thinking ideas. When he became finance minister in UPA, he was much more constrained by coalition politics than he was in a kind of very small coalition which had outside support. He got away with a much more visionary budget. But the truth is, and that my answer has already hinted at the truth, it is political constraints that have prevented too much forward thinking. What I've not been able to understand is what political constraints have held back this government, which for 10 years had a complete and absolute majority. They could have been much more visionary. In all fairness to my friend Arun Jaitley, the late Arun Jaitley, he did have a number of ideas that were fairly significant departures from some of the constraints in the economy. And as you know, the revamping of the banking sector, the reduction of indebtedness, the introduction of the bankruptcy code, these are all things that have helped you all in business as well. So some good things did happen. But the kind of vision that has been portrayed in my speech, I am fully aware that the challenges and constraints are overwhelmingly political. And the one obvious example is labor laws. When Mr. Modi, with a full majority, talked about labor laws, he got a massive pushback from every union in the country, including his own party's union. And he quietly withdrew the laws. Eventually, the suggestion was made that state governments could adopt laws. And this is going to be a very interesting thing. How far can state governments go? I'll tell you, I mean, I have been an opponent of the LDF government in this state. But I was very struck by the fact that as recently as 3 years ago, when I researched this last, the average time it took to start a business, to open a business from scratch, is 3 days in Singapore and the US. That is to get all the permissions required and start a business. The average in India was 114 days, and the average in Kerala was 236 days. Now, 10 days ago, our industry minister, Mr. P. Rajiv, made a statement saying that in Kerala now it takes 2 minutes to open a business. I would love to believe that, and if that's true, that is a considerable accomplishment. If a communist government can overcome its own fondness for over-regulation and for various kinds of red tape that tie up everything, in this business of business opening, we can do it across the board. I have personal experience of how incredibly process-oriented and frankly unconcerned about time our bureaucracy is in Kerala. The simplest decisions that in most parts of the world would take a day or two, or perhaps even 15 minutes, will take weeks in Kerala. That is undoubtedly the case, and that needs to be tackled. But if it is possible for the communist government or the LDF government to do it, now I don't know if the 2 minutes is a hyperbole, and it may well be a hyperbole, but if he claims right now that all the permissions required to open a business can be done in one single window in 2 minutes flat, that is a tremendous step forward, and we can replicate that kind of model across the board. Then Kerala might be able to do something quite dramatic. If labor law reform means that the most powerful and frankly most troublesome labor unions, which are affiliated to the ruling party of the state, can be persuaded to sign on to reforms, which will, for example, permit businesses to hire and fire with greater flexibility, then you will find it possible to attract investors. I have been arguing for the last 5 years that Kerala should pass a Model Investor Protection Act. Why is that required? Because frankly, whereas every state in our country sadly has a record of farmer suicides, we are the only state in the country with a record of investor suicides. There are at least 2 examples in the last 5-6 years of people returning to Kerala with their life savings, investing them in land, factory, business, and then being stymied between the combination of the politicians, the unions, and the bureaucrats, and being forced to commit suicide as they see their life savings sunk down the drain. Now, that kind of thing requires an Investor Protection Act to ensure that the only thing you are not protected from is normal business losses. But you can and should be protected from the misuse of governmental power, political interference, and union trouble, so that again should reassure you your investments are safe in Kerala. I've met too many Malayalis, Marunaran Malayalis, who are reluctant to invest here because of this reputation. So if we can change these things, why can't we grow in Kerala? And we might be able to set an example for the rest of India. But this question of a visionary budget must always face up to the political realities. And this is going to be a challenge for any finance minister. I think Mr. Modi's government, despite now being a coalition, is still much less vulnerable to that kind of political weakness than some of the coalitions of the past, whether it was the UF government of 96 to 98, whether it was the UPA government, where there were challenges. It could be possible that we can get a visionary budget, but we haven't seen one for some time.
Considering the GDP growth rate data for the past few years, it can be seen that the Indian economy is doing very well. But on contrary to it, I heard one of the opinions of one of the economists of JNU University. He opined that the GDP growth rate data is based on the organized sector data. They are not considering the unorganized data, unorganized sector data, which is actually depleting. So I just wanted to know your views on that.
I agree 100%. In fact, the informal sector, as it's called, is actually much larger in India than the formal sector, the organized sector, and it's therefore not counted adequately. Number 2, the number of sectors in which the GDP calculations are done are weighted very heavily towards certain growth industries and insufficiently weighted towards the small, medium, and micro sector, which particularly after the demonetization of 20 the figures, or at least massage the figures to make themselves look good. So all of these things have raised serious questions about our GDP numbers, because again, if you compare to the UPA using the same criteria now, then the comparison is very unfavorable to the NDA government. They constantly talk about the UPA GDP percentage on the basis of the old numbers and the old basis for calculation, and they give their numbers on a new basis. Now, I don't want to waste too much time on this. Ultimately, all of us feel the economy in our pockets. You don't really need to sit around looking at numbers beyond a certain point. Yes, it's good in terms of attracting more investment if you're seen to be a booming and growing economy. Everyone wants to come to a growing economy because they think they'll get better return on their investment and so on. But apart from that larger picture, the reality of investment in our country has to be, how do you feel? Do you feel that you have more disposable income? Do you feel you're better off than you were last year? Are you able to afford the same things you were able to afford at the bazaar, the market last year? I mean, those are the kinds of things the average Indian feels, and the average Indian, I must say, there are 2 realities, the black and the white, that the previous questioner mentioned. There is a sector of our society, maybe 10 to 20%, that is absolutely thriving. And there is a large chunk that is not, that is feeling the pinch every day. So for a section of our Indians, for example, inflation is not a problem. In fact, they're beneficiaries of it. For another sector, it suddenly means that they can no longer buy as many vegetables at the market as they were able to buy, and that sector is larger. So that's why, this question of economic growth to me has got to be about people. It can't just be about numbers. And the numbers at the moment may look good superficially, but the reality in terms of inflation, in terms of people's purchasing power, in terms of employment, those are the realities that I was trying to tackle in my speech need to be improved. We have to create jobs, and we have to create jobs for everybody, for young people, for college graduates, in the agricultural sector, amongst women. All these are sectors which, frankly, at the moment are slipping and have been slipping ever since demonetization and then COVID. In COVID, we got the largest loss of female participation in the workforce of any country was in India.
K.K. Pillai, I'm an exporter of frozen food items to US also, and president of Cochin Special Economic Zone.
Your profits have been going up as the rupee has been slipping.
Definitely. And also the regional chairman of Export Promotion Council of India. The point what I was trying to bring it to your attention, of course, we enjoyed your talk and very impressively expressed all your views. As you said, black and white, you made it very clear, and we understood also. Now, in between you said the export figure has come down. In fact, I remember I had an occasion to have an online meeting when Prime Minister was seeking the disadvantages of export commitment, how you would be able to come forward. That question, we were about 1,500 people were participating in that online meeting, and they were seeking the advices in which 15 ambassadors also have been brought into that, tagged into that meeting. They said, you are not sitting here to facilitate the people to travel from India to your country and the people from there to India. You are supposed to move away from your chair and find out that country, what product from India can sell over there. That information has to be passed on to India. That is the way the local products has to be promoted for export activities. So I would say from 400, the figure was 400 million. From 400 billion to today, I think it is close to 700 billion. So we can't say that our export is not growing.
Sorry, sir, it's not grown as a percentage of GDP, I should have specified.
Okay.
As a percentage of GDP, export should have been much more than 700 million. They should have been closer to, 700 billion, you said.
Yes, 700 billion.
They should be closer to over $1 trillion, but they're not.
Yeah, that I think by 27, they are projecting that, and we are all taking part in that lead also. At the same time, another question which is very tricky, what I'm talking about, now there is a discussion going on because of the productivity of our country. As you said, China is very much advanced and Vietnam is advanced because the number of hours they are working is more.
Don't get me started on that.
There is a discussion going on now.
Yes, there is.
90 hours working has to be enhanced per week. Yes, day before yesterday, I have seen a discussion on the television, I think Republic Channel. So what is your view on that? At least 10 hours working per person would be able to generate much more productivity in Indian culture so that the economy can be taken to the next level by 2027.
I mean, he has become a butt of ridicule. I mean, we've gone from discussing work-life balance to discussing work-wife balance. but that apart, I mean, the truth is that, somebody else was joking the other day that, maybe the best solution for the country should be arranged marriages between L&T people and Infosys people. And they can marry each other and ignore each other until retirement because they'll each be working 70 hours and 90 hours respectively. No, I mean, look, seriously, the number of hours is a completely irrelevant consideration. It's the productivity that matters in those hours. You know that Denmark is one of the most thriving, growing economies in the world, and they have a 34-hour work week. 34 hours is all they work. They don't even work 7 hours a day, 5 days a week. Now, I'm not saying that that's a model necessarily, the Scandinavian climate being what it is. I would also rather stay indoors in the heat. But I'm just saying the truth is that what we produce in those, whether we work 40 hours, 50 hours, 60 hours, what we may do, what we produce in that time is far more important than the number of hours we work. And honestly, our productivity needs to be improved. And a lot of productivity improvements are possible through technology as well as through better skill development. I mean, I have been very frustrated on the skill development issue. When I was very briefly a minister in the education ministry, I actually had diagnosed this problem, made a number of speeches, explaining why this is not just an economic issue, but a national security imperative. We absolutely need to skill our unskilled and unemployed people. I've given some figures, I even mentioned them in earlier speeches, where the percentage of our labor force that is skilled is ridiculously low by comparison with any other economy, not just the developed countries, even by many developing country standards. We have very, very few skilled people. In fact, technically there is a shortage in this country of qualified masons, and that is why construction is going on everywhere, because every single Indian mason with a certificate is actually working in the Gulf and no longer working here. I mean, why is that so? We ought to have gone on a war footing to create a skill development capacity. I would have been in favor of a law obliging every company of a certain size to set up a skill training academy by law as part of their corporate responsibility, and ensure that, yes, they can have the first dibs on those they produce out of that, but the rest will be going into the marketplace with equipped with certificates, and they can then trade in for all of that. Right now, our skilling is pathetic, and without skills, you're constantly always stumbling on the job, and your productivity is bound to be lower. That's across the board. Then the quality of our training, our ITIs are using hopelessly old-fashioned equipment and training workers. So when they go into the modern workplace, either they're using equipment they know, which is much less efficient than what the competition has, or they are suddenly faced with training in one kind of equipment and having to use other kinds of equipment. They don't do it very well, and their productivity is also affected, etc., etc. We can give you example after example of this. And this government botched its first term, I'm sorry to say, on skill development. Then in the second term, they merged a number of ministries and departments, created one humongous skill development ministry with very little to show for it to the end of their second term. This has been an area where, honestly, there has been a lack of imagination, a lack of application, a lack of focus, and a lack of results. But honestly, if we do that, we can improve our productivity. But talking about 90 hours, 70 hours at a time when the entire world is moving towards greater work-life balance is foolish. Because honestly, we are increasingly heading, particularly in white-collar work, we are heading towards a world in which more and more white-collar workers will have leisure time, or will find that the kinds of jobs they can do can be done better by machines or by AI programs. And therefore, either they have to learn new skills or they have more free time on their hands. So sitting around 90 hours doing what an AI machine can do in 2 hours is pointless also.
Yes. The product what we are manufacturing, we are not getting reasonable margin, number one. Number two is that the government compliances are very high today. Even GST as well as income tax. ഞാൻ പറയുമ്പോഴും GST ഉദ്യോഗസ്ഥന്മാരും ഇൻകം ടാക്സ് ഉദ്യോഗസ്ഥന്മാരും രാത്രി കാണുന്ന ദുസ്വപ്നം പിറ്റേ ദിവസം ഇംപ്ലിമെൻറ്റ് ചെയ്യുന്നു. So for people like us, it is very difficult to follow up that compliances. And another factor is that, sir, as you know, court of law. നമ്മുടെ പൈസ നമ്മളൊരു സാധനം സപ്ലൈ ചെയ്ത് കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ ആ പേയ്മെൻറ്റ് കിട്ടിയില്ലെങ്കിൽ നമ്മൾ കോർട്ടിൽ പോയി കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ ഒരു ലൈഫ് സ്പാൻ തികയില്ല നമുക്ക് ആ കോടതിയിൽ നിന്ന് കേസ് തീരാൻ. 5 വർഷമായാലും ചെക്ക് കേസ് ആയാലും സിവിൽ കേസ് ആയാലും തീരില്ല. അങ്ങനെ വരുമ്പോൾ ഹൗ വി സ്റ്റാർട്ട് എ ബിസിനസ് ഹിയർ? താങ്ക് യു.
ഈ കെമിക്കൽസ് ആൻഡ് ഫെർട്ടിലൈസേഴ്സ് കമ്മിറ്റിയുടെ ചെയർ ആയിരിക്കുമ്പോൾ അവിടെ ഫാർമസ്യൂട്ടിക്കൽ ഡിപ്പാർട്ട്മെൻറ്റ് ഞങ്ങൾ കീഴിലായിരുന്നു. അപ്പോൾ 1-2 പ്രശ്നങ്ങൾ താങ്കൾ പറഞ്ഞ് ശരി തന്നെയാണ്. പക്ഷെ വേറെ പ്രശ്നങ്ങളുണ്ടല്ലോ. നിങ്ങളുടെ ഇൻഡസ്ട്രിയിലെ ക്വാളിറ്റി കൺട്രോൾ മഹാമോശമാണ്. നമ്മുടെ ഫാർമസ്യൂട്ടിക്കൽസ് പല ഭാഗത്തും സബ് സ്റ്റാൻഡേർഡ് ആയിട്ട് വന്നിട്ട് അതിനെ എക്സ്പോർട്ട് ചെയ്തിട്ട് ഭാരതത്തിൽ ദുഷ്പേരും കൂടി കേട്ടിട്ടുണ്ട്. 2-3 രാജ്യത്തിൽ ആൾക്കാർ മരിച്ചു പോയിട്ടുണ്ട് നമ്മുടെ ഫാർമസ്യൂട്ടിക്കൽസ് കഴിച്ചിട്ട്. അപ്പോൾ അതോടെ ഭാരതത്തിനൊരു പ്രശ്നമുണ്ട്. അപ്പോൾ സർക്കാരിന് ഫാർമസ്യൂട്ടിക്കൽസിന് ആവശ്യമുള്ള സൂപ്പർവിഷൻ കൊടുക്കുന്നില്ല എന്നൊരു പരാതി പലവർക്കും ഉള്ളതാണ്. അതിൻ്റെ ഒപ്പം താങ്കൾ പറയുന്നു taxes are too high, probably. Price controls are too high and too strict. That's also probably correct. അപ്പോൾ ഇതെല്ലാം നോക്കുമ്പോൾ you do have a challenge. I can't pretend that I have an answer for you. But definitely, it is in India's interest to have a thriving pharmaceutical industry that can itself be part of the export market, which requires a whole package of activities. It requires, number one, better quality control. I'm sorry to say this, because if an Indian antibiotic that says 500 milligrams actually only contains 282, which I've heard in multiple cases, there are books about exposing our pharmacy. The Indian Army has received medicines of which 82% did not contain the advertised amounts on the printed package. Indian Army, can you imagine? So what the ordinary citizens are getting? There is a real problem with quality. So number one, quality control in my view. Number two, obviously, facilitation for your inputs. the active pharmaceutical ingredients are sometimes very expensive because they're not locally available, have to be imported, and there's tariffs on the imports. This is a major challenge. We are relying on a lot of imports of active pharmaceutical ingredients from China. And as a result of the bad relations with China in recent years, that has been affected. The third thing, you're quite right, may be that your price controls make it impossible for you to have a viable economic market for whatever particular pharmaceutical you're manufacturing. But then you could in turn go to the government and say, what can I manufacture that is viable? You're making my business impossible. And you should get a receptive answer from the authorities there. And number 4 would be, of course, taxes and GST, which you've mentioned. All of these as a package. We need a visionary minister in the pharmaceutical area who will give you a complete reinvention. Pharmaceuticals could be a growth engine for India. We have inexpensive pharmaceuticals of unfortunately unreliable quality, but we do have a thriving industry, and those quality products, companies like Cipla and many other Indian companies have established very credible reputations worldwide, and they are now exporting massively. Yours may be a small new company. We need to help you become a Cipla of the future. And that is certainly a role the government can and should play. But my sitting in the opposition, there is not a heck of a lot I can do about it, other than to identify these elements and suggest them to the authorities, which I have done already in my very brief stint as chairman of that particular committee. The ideas are always there in our country, so it's always implementation that's a problem.
I would like to invite our Vice President, Ms. Vinodini Sukumar, for the vote of thanks.
Good evening. It's been a wonderful evening, and I think we have heard so many perspectives of India forward, and there's been so much of direction in the black and white analysis that Dr. Tharoor has made. I had always felt that in one of your speeches earlier, you had mentioned how India matters. And you had mentioned that what happens in India affects 1/6 of humanity. That itself shows the sheer size, scale, and possibilities that exist in our country. And also coinciding with the fact that we are the 3rd largest economy with the purchasing power parity, I think, and a youth that is at least 50% of our population is the youth. I think there's a lot to look forward to, especially the positives that you mentioned now, the way forward with regard to startups, with the manufacturing sector, and also with innovation and science. I think in terms of technology, I think we have a lot of possibilities, and you have really shown us what India can do in its way forward. And I'm sure that irrespective of what the political scenario is and whoever comes into power, the youth is going to be unstoppable, the way we see our startup ecosystem growing, both across India and in Kerala, sir. Thank you very much for that inspiring address, and I'm sure that all of us have a lot of takeaways from today's talk, sir. So moving on to the formal vote of thanks, I'm very honored and privileged to propose a vote of thanks here today at this event of India Forward, which is one of our flagship events of the Chamber. And you have added so much more value with your words here today, sir. Thank you very much to the Honorable Member of Parliament, Dr. Shashi Tharoor, and thank you for taking time out and being with us today. And of course, even being a Sunday, we were very happy to be here today, sir. I would also like to thank our guests, our Customs Commissioner, Mr. Gurcharan Singh. Thank you very much for being here today, sir. Our Deputy Commissioner of Customs and Indirect Taxes, Mr. T.P. Salim Kumar. Thank you very much, sir, for being here. I would like to thank all the dignitaries and members of the Cochin Chamber who have graced the occasion today and taken the Sunday evening off to be here and be a very patient audience. Of course, we would have loved to hear Dr. Tharoor say a lot more. Yes, and I would like to thank all the members of the committee, all the secretariat that has taken immense pains to make sure that this event went off smoothly. And I would also like to thank the hotel authorities for putting this show together with, no hassles. And luckily, being a Sunday today, we did not have too much of traffic hassles, and hopefully we were happy to have started it on time. And so I would also like to thank our sponsors. Federal Bank is here, SBI is here, and Tropicana, who's one of our charter members, and he is traveling and not present here today, but I think the representatives are here. I would like to thank our sponsors, without whose support this event could not have been happening in such a graceful manner. Thank you very much to all of you. I would like to end this evening by saying that we look forward to all of you attending more of these sessions, which we plan to have in the future. And we are indeed hoping that Dr. Tharoor will also come in again for one of our events, flagship events that we are planning in the future too, sir. We would love to hear more from you. Thank you so much for being here today. Thank you all and wishing you all a very good evening. Thank you.